Hello and welcome. We start with the developments in the Horn of Africa. Neighbours and rivals, Ethiopia and Somalia, sit at a negotiating table to diffuse tensions. Both sides are resuming talks on disagreements over a port deal that Ethiopia signed with Somaliland, Somalia's breakaway region that has declared unilateral independence. The deal was signed in January this year. That grants Ethiopia a 50-year lease on a naval base with access to Somaliland's Berbera port. In exchange, Ethiopia agreed to become the first nation to officially recognize Somaliland. Ethiopia is the world's most populous country without sea access. However, the deal drew strong reactions from Somalia, which called it illegal and an attack on its sovereignty. In response, Somalia announced the expulsion of Ethiopia's ambassador from the country. It also shut down Ethiopia's consulates. Now, this deepened the rift between the two nations, which had already fought two wars in the past century. Somalia's close ally, Turkey, has tried to mediate between the neighbors. It hosted the first round of talks between Somalia and Ethiopian Foreign Minister last month. And now the second round of talks, dubbed Ankara Process, comes after Turkish Foreign Minister visited the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa and met Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. As per the Turkish Foreign Ministry, the fresh talks aim to find a way to give Ethiopia access to international waters through Somalia without upsetting its territorial sovereignty. In recent years, Turkey has become a close ally of the Somali government. Ankara has built schools, hospitals and infrastructure and provided scholarships for Somalis. In 2017, Turkey opened its biggest overseas military base in Somalia's capital of Mogadishu. Earlier this year, Turkey and Somalia signed a defense and economic cooperation agreement. Meanwhile, Somaliland officials had expressed their objection and concerns with Somalia-Ethiopia talks. How will the rift in the Horn of Africa end? Now, to discuss this further, we have with us Advocate Sipho Mantula. He is a researcher at TM African School of Public and International Affairs. He joins us live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, and greetings to your viewers.
Now, Turkey has stepped in as a facilitator of talks between the two African countries to address their differences over a controversial port deal involving Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland. Take us through the details here. What has prompted Turkey's involvement in the mediation process?
Remember, as you have said, even in your introduction towards the end, my sister, you have touched on the both bilateral agreements that both Turkey and Somalia had entered into almost 5 to 6 years ago. But if you look back in the conflict and the interest of Turkey, it is that you cannot have two great countries that are in the Horn of Africa quarreling not over the natural resources only, but even the issue of the Somaliland recognition in this diplomatic row. So it is important for us to understand that for Turkey to become a mediator in this aspect, it shows also that they are reminding the African Union that has tried also, the United Nations that has also tried, because the issue of the borderlands or the demarcation disputes have been problematic in the African Union. But for Turkey to enter this space also is to safeguard its interest, but at the same time to be found to be impartial in this mediation, because once you have a mediation, you need to be neutral. And what is important is to take context of what were the push and the pull triggers. And as we have said also, for Turkey, it is that the agreement between Somaliland and Ethiopia can be the trigger. But how do you resolve it? That is how important it is for this conflict to at least find its resolution. It might have to be managed. It cannot end immediately, because these conflicts of border disputes, natural resources in the Horn of Africa, they've been there for many years.
Yeah, and the tension arose after Ethiopia signed a memorandum of understanding with Somaliland, granting Ethiopia access to the Red Sea in exchange for recognizing Somaliland as an independent nation. Now, Somalia has considered this as a violation of its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. What are the key issues being discussed during the mediation talks?
I think you will understand during the mediation talks, one has to go to the source of the rift and the conflict, what has already caused tension with the recalling of ambassadors. That will also affect ordinary citizens of Somaliland, Somalia, and Ethiopia as they are even traveling. It will affect also the trade issues. It will also affect the issue of the cohesion in the Horn of Africa in terms of the strength of the unity amongst the people in the Horn of Africa, considering the conflicts that has been going on, whether in the north part of Ethiopia or in the southern part, but also within Somalia. They are still struggling with some of the remnants who are terrorist groups. And you will understand that for this peace process to find its resonance, to find its to find the light under the sun, it is important if they can deal, obviously, with the issues of the recognition of the state of Somaliland. Yes. Because we will remember that the issue of separation of member states from Sudan, North Sudan, the South Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, it is a history of the Horn of Africa for many years, for 4 decades to 5 decades, that you are always having these rifts around territorial integrity. And that's why I said to you earlier, the AU has been shying away. They are muted in terms of addressing the question of borderlands, or what you call land demarcations, in most of the African countries, particularly in the Horn of Africa and in the east of the African continent. And that's how you can see that this mediation process, it is very important that both parties must find each other for the sake of their citizens and for the sake of the African Union Agenda 2063, which talks of a peaceful and a prosperous continent.
Yes, and Advocate Mantula, the main focus, as you've mentioned, is, of course, finding a mutually acceptable deal that could grant Ethiopia sea access. And then the talks aim to resolve this dispute and to ease the tensions. Give us your view on how you think this will be resolved.
You know, for me, is that you have issues of energy crisis in the Horn of Africa. For Ethiopia to get the access to the Red Sea, let's look at the push and the pull factors. Let's look at the views of Somalia in terms of the Somaliland recognition. What are the wins and wins, not the losses only? Because in any negotiation phase, what is important is when parties enter with a good faith, when parties engage not to rush. For me, I see Turkey also as a consultant in this mediation. So for me, it will be important if it was the AU as a guarantor of this peace process, meaning the AU become a witness of these peace talks. And secondly, the neighboring countries between Ethiopia and Somaliland and Somalia need to have an interest, like IGAD, the intergovernmental authorities in Africa. COMESA have to be interested in these talks, and particularly looking also at the issues of sovereignty in Africa post 1960, post the 21st century, that we have been labeling it as an African century, but we are still having conflicts, pockets of conflicts that affects even development and growth. So as they enter these talks, they need to understand that, yes, there are issues of emergency and agency, but there are also issues where they need to engage openly, like I said earlier, with good faith. And as they enter into a peace settlement or to get into the moratorium of agreement, cessation of even recalling their diplomats in various hosting countries, that will also affect, like I said to you, the people-to-people contact. It will also affect the issue of trade deficit between the two countries, and including how I see the role of Turkey, that we should not undermine the role of Turkey, because we see talks are happening in Geneva this week on Sudan also, and they're not mediated by the African Union. They are being mediated by the US So the interest of other other European countries or neighboring countries in African conflicts should also be looked with a critical eye, should also be seen not only as selling out the African question of territorial integrity, which was caused by the Berlin Conference, by the way. So even if you have to look at the African demarcations of land, it was because of the Berlin Agreement of 1884 and 1885 that caused partition of many African states.
Right. Absolutely. Advocate, thank you very much for being with us and for sharing your views on First Post Africa.
Thank you very much, Asante-san.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for a future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On the today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special
We start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. For the first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to First Post America. I'm Aaron Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C.